So hi everyone, Joey Lorraine here, director of Black Lives Rising Dance Film Festival. I'm pleased to have Mark Freeman here, Professor Emeritus of Television, Film, and New Media from the School of Theater, Television, and Film at San Diego State University. Mr. Freeman's work has been screened at the Smithsonian's Institute National Museum of Natural History, the American Museum of Natural History, and the Museum of Modern Art, to name a few. He has been an independent documentary filmmaker. Ooh, that's a mouthful. And professor for over 40 years. And I'm pleased to have him here to discuss his dance film, Atena Nets, based in Ghana. Did I pronounce that correctly, by the way?
Well, it's Twee, unless you're a Twee speaker.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I say Atena, but
Okay.
I have no Twee.
Awesome. So
like on so much, I rely deeply on my collaborators in Ghana, and they were fantastic throughout the whole process.
Awesome. So the film is a site-specific film, that dance film that's made specifically for the camera. And if you could just summarize the film and give us a little bit of a backstory about what drew you to make this film.
Well, my practice has been making dance for camera for some time now, and a good deal of the work has been international. So I've made films in Indonesia and South Africa before making this film in Ghana. And I was invited to participate in an academic conference sponsored by our university system. And they said, they'll take me to Ghana. And I said, well, if I'm going to Ghana, I'm making a movie, So the conference was of some interest, but for me, it was an opportunity to meet dancers and to learn more about Ghana. And so that was the genesis of the project.
Interesting. And can you tell us a little bit about the actual process, the creative process, how you came up with the ideas, the visual metaphors, because I did read up a little bit on the film and it's flooded with African symbolism. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Again, I'm very fortunate in that I have the opportunity to work with very talented, creative, and knowledgeable people. I don't pretend to come with a lot of prior knowledge. I'm very much an outsider, and I'm very grateful that people accept me as such. And sort of, I see my role as a bridge to other larger audiences who may not have an opportunity to travel to Ghana or learn about Ghanaian dance or Ghanaian history. And so if they can make me understand it, then maybe I can help somebody else understand it. So
it's a collaborative process.
Absolutely. And so before I went to Ghana, this is typical of my process. I began a networking search, if you will, for choreographers, dancers, and I thought I was going to need a photographer, but I actually was able to bring a student who did a great job.
A student was the camera?
The cinematographer, yeah.
That is amazing, because that's one thing that really struck out to me is that because you're most independent documentary filmmakers, it's not unusual for the filmmaker to actually also do their own shooting, especially with documentary work. But here you actually have a cinematographer, and I just thought that was it struck me. I was like, oh, okay, he decided to bring, but now why not if it's a student?
So hold that, and I'd like to go back and finish my response to your question about the process. So when I met Julius and Saya, and they said, yes, we're willing to do this, because these things are made, out of goodwill, right? I mean, it's an exchange. The dancers give me their work, and when the film was finished, I turn the film to them.
Right. Okay.
Right. So they were enthusiastic, and we spent a good deal of time scouting for locations, and getting to know each other is part of that process. So initially they took me to all the famous places where tourists would go to see what Accra looks like. And I'm going, no, 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 I want, let's find something, let's like find something that's not a national monument or the largest market, although the market was interesting, we looked at that. And anyhow, it was just very fortuitous that we were looking at the murals in this cultural center. And I'm inquisitive, and we just poked around the back, and there was this space that overlooked the beach and the fishermen and everything. I said, all right, well, we found the space. And then we spent a good deal of time scouting the space because we were a very small crew, and as I said, with no budget, and the space really didn't lend itself to anything but relying on natural light. So we're trying to figure out, well, when's the light going to be on the balcony and when's it going to be in the ocean, and how can we shoot both at the same time? So we did a lot of preparatory work. And then we went back to the process of rehearsing and creating the dance. And as we developed that, I think it was Julius, we were talking about the fishermen, and we said, fishermen nets, what can we do with nets? And so we got some props and began to work through that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So it actually really did start with the site.
Absolutely.
With the environment. And then from there out, you get the so-called mise en scène, right?
Right. And then, of course, there's actually people living in a small apartment right at the back of where we're filming. And there's stuff, this is their porch, storage area, whatever, but we, dressed it. We looked at what was there and we arranged things so that there was a space to dance, a space to film, but it was all working within that environment. And then I think it was good that we added a larger context. So the film opens with the neighborhood right in front of where we ended up. So dance starts in the community and then goes to the space, and then the dance begins.
Yes, yes. There does seem to be, and this is not an easy thing to do, which is why I'm not surprised that you have over 40 years experience of
You're making me older than I want to admit, but yes.
But seriously, of creating a piece that is kind of big in landscape, but so intimate at the same time. And I definitely got that feeling that I could feel the culture, and I could feel, I don't know how to say, the humanity of this culture, but yet it was also very intimate and insular, and the range there that you were able to capture in such a short period of time with such fluidity is really amazing.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you see that. I really have a sense that in this case, Emesh being within the scene and working close, I'm always looking to use the camera to discover something that is a different experience than if you were there witnessing the dance, because these dances only exist on screen, right? And so the idea is, how can we create an experience for a viewer on the screen that doesn't exist anywhere else? If you watched the filming, it wouldn't be at all what we were trying to assemble.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of the time with dance film, it's a little bit difficult for, maybe to think about, well, why does this film really work in comparison to another film? Like, what is it about this film that just, works as a dance film? And for me, I find that a lot of, for me anyway, what strikes me as, and what fascinates me about the specific art form of dance on film is that there's this kinesthetic feeling that I get when I watch a great dance film that's very different. It's a very different experience than watching dance on stage.
Right, which is wonderful in its own distinct way. But if we've been out of public performance spaces for a couple of years now, so a lot of people have started to experiment or try to practice this form without maybe realizing what the differences are, right? And for me, my work is based on my experience making documentaries, and there, a lot of documentaries have interviews, but in the observational part of documentaries, it's really being present in the moment, in a way that lets you discover things that are spontaneous. And it's that energy of capturing things in the moment, that I think I try to bring to the dance film.
Oh my goodness. And there's such a suspension of time. Maybe that's the best way I can say it. I remember in the beginning of the film where the sound design, now that I watched it, I was like, wow, the whole, it was like a big orchestra of music and sound and mime and everything when I don't know what her name is because she's nameless, but there's one female dancer and one male dancer, and the female dancer is using a broom to brush the floor, and the way the sound is, it's so enhanced that it's just like you could just be there. And then it's in conjunction with her partner who is pouring water right out of this big judge, and that whole thing, I mean, it's such one of the most mundane activities, but you made it into something so magical and enticing, and that's, I think, a mastery of the craft. Like, how do you do that,
Well, that scene is rooted in one of the in tradition, right? And that's one of the things I've been interested in exploring in these films that I've made internationally, is how do you take contemporary dance and with practitioners who are really totally aware of the larger practices, in Europe and the United States, even if they're in Indonesia or South Africa or Ghana, and bring something of the local culture, the particular culture, to that expression. And so there's a ritual aspect to that, to the pouring of water and the sweeping.
Purification, right?
It means that we're going to start something. And so, I had some inklings of this, but really to make it work and to understand it and to put it in a context that was appropriate, I, totally depended on my collaborators. So we should mention their names. It's Julius Gansa and Sina Atsuka, who are the dancers and choreographers. And, they work together to collaborate. And it's typical of the choreographic processes that I've been involved in that it starts with an idea or a block of moves, and then people play against that, and then as they create, then they identify, yes, this is the movement, and it's going to go with that one over there that we've done before. But it's an organic process that these dancers have worked together a considerable amount of time in other things, so they had a shared vocabulary that they could draw from.
Right. They seemed to be very unified in the way, I mean, and that's another thing too, how it was almost as if, well, they were essentially talking with each other through their movement. I mean, it really does feel like a dialogue between them, even though there's no speaking. I mean, you managed to really pull that off beautifully.
So there's an exchange of energy, which, what if you have a duet or intimate dance like that, that's what it's about. But then there's another layer, that there's a tradition of nonverbal hand signals that are used by ordinary people typically in Ghana. And so some of those are incorporated into the piece. And it's like anything, the more prior knowledge you bring to a piece as a viewer, the more you'll get out of it. So a Ghanaian will recognize those gestures, which to us, if you're unfamiliar with them, are interesting gestures, but don't have a specific meaning.
Right, right. And yes, towards the end of the film, the hand dance, if you
right.
will. And for some reason, it's amazing how images do kind of resonate in the brain. I thought of when I was a little girl, my dad, one of his favorite games to play with me was the hand game, you know,
Uh-huh.
where it's like where you have your hands in. I would always lose. I would always lose. And I just thought of that. And it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't the same connection. It's for them, it's more about like there's this metaphor of the hands kind of representing the hand of God
Mhm.
taking in, right, kind of
Right.
directing fate, if you will, which was fascinating.
Right,
But
right.
whether you know, whether you're so aware of the history or not, I mean, it works.
So
The
that,
gesture.
that's the idea, is to introduce people to a vocabulary and a culture that they may be curious about, and here's an opportunity to bring it to life and raise more questions. Let's go see some more.
Right, right, absolutely. And so with your cinematographer, can
Yes.
you tell us a little bit about how that about your relationship with them and how you were able to effectively communicate them to get your vision alive, because it seemed as if the camera was just as much of a dancer as the dancers.
I'm glad you see that. That certainly was our intention. So Jenna Castillo was an undergraduate and came highly, highly recommended by our cinematography professor, my colleague. And there was a pot of money for collaboration with students over the summer. And I thought that this would just be a great opportunity for her to expand her range of work and have more things for her portfolio. So we talked a lot about how to film this. And one of the key aspects in which I think contributed a lot to the film, but also complicated the mechanics of filming, is this gizmo called a gimbal, which is a frame that suspends the camera and it kind of floats, which means you can walk around with the camera, literally get in somebody's face with it, and it's not shaky. It's pleasant to look at. And so it's very, very flexible, but it takes some practice to, one, install it, and then two, to manipulate it. But Jenna was very good, and she understood what I was trying to get at, and brought the vision to life. So I was very grateful for that.
Have you used that the gimbal in other dance films that you've done, or is this the first time you've experimented?
That was the first time that in Indonesia, the piece I did with my colleague Carrie Ann Chimsham that I was mentioning before we started to talk, who's at NYU. I worked with a local cinematographer who just knew the his wife was like my fixer, if you will. I mean, she introduced me to everybody in Indonesia, and she was very integrated in the dance film community and was a practitioner herself. So he had a lot of practice, and he was able to do it in a similar way, but just using his body. But the idea is the cinematographer has to understand the dance so that not only respond, but anticipate. And then to move the camera in a deliberate way so that when it moves, it arrives someplace and it's not searching for where the shot is.
It really does sound like the same skill set one would have to have, excuse me, to be a good dance partner.
So it's
Yeah.
back to this idea, which is the sort of integral to my documentary practice, of being present, being in the moment, responding to what's actually there, and not thinking about what you should have done or what will happen next, but actually entering that dialogue.
Yes, yes, the very, very much came through. I'm wondering throughout the filmmaking process, was there any particular part of the film that was unusually challenging for you, and how you got through that particular challenge?
Interesting question, and it's related to cinematography. Um, you've heard the expression about, you know, bugs in code or bugs in the ointment. Well, we literally had a bug fly behind the mount of the lens and the sensor in the camera. And so our first day of shooting had bug mark. And of course, we were all a little bit disappointed about this. And Jenna said that we should have been playing the footage back as we were filming, and we would have seen the bug. And I was saying, the light's going down, it looks good, let's just keep going. So we shot a second day, and we used some of the buggy footage, but not too much.
I would never. Now I'm going to look for it and see if I can.
No, you cut around the bug. You know, I never heard of this happening to anybody else, ever.
First of all, in Africa, I'm not surprised. I'm definitely not surprised.
But, you know, filmmaking, in my experience, when I tell my students, it's all about problem solving. It's not about who did it or why it happened, which is a lesson for later. But really, in the production, stuff always happens, and you're successful in that you come up with a solution and move on.
Right. And the more experience you have, right, then of course that helps. Maybe also a little bit of temperament. I don't know.
I wish. Of course, you know, it was disappointing for us, but you know, it just goes to the I can't say the word, but the generosity of all my collaborators, because they had to come and spend a whole day doing it. We had to secure the location again. The light was different. We just carried on. So,
right.
But yes, that was a challenge.
Right. I want to talk for a little bit about the sound design and the music, because that also seems to be so integral, so married to the imagery. And I'm wondering, like, how did that happen?
I'm going to tell you another thing that was a surprise to me when I started to make these kinds of films. Most of my career, I was making social issue documentaries, and constrained by the topic, and you know, the politics and the personalities and the facts. And I actually studied in art school at the San Francisco Art Institute, and so the opportunity to just make things that are purely visual, right, about color and form and the relationship to music, is astounding. This is a long way around to how does the music come together. So as an outsider who made documentaries, I assumed that people created choreography to music, and that it was identifying the music was integral to the creative process. And all the choreographers I've worked with, much to my surprise, they work out the choreography and the music comes later. So that was the case here. And because this is an international collaboration, and the gods smiled at me, there is a Alliance Française in Accra that was having an African music festival just shortly before I was leaving. And at that festival, there was actually a colleague who I didn't know at a sister California State University. I'm in San Diego, he was in Fresno. He was there at a Fulbright, and he had been working for a year making music with this international collaboration. They had German musicians, and he's from America, and a number of really talented Ghanaian musicians. And so I loved their music. And so I said to them, you know, I'm making this little movie. This music would be really wonderful. What do you think? And again, people respond, I can't tell you why, except that I'm grateful, and say yes. They give me this gift. And so there were, I don't know, a dozen tracks maybe, and I selected pieces from the multiple tracks and then fit them into different portions of the film.
Yeah. No, the sound really is exquisite. The sound design, the music, because it really does create the story in the sense that it sets the tone, literally, the mood, like in many of the scenes with the net imagery, the processed violin, it almost sounds like there are times when it sounds very eerie and it almost sounds, you know, constraining, which actually enhances the imagery, and I thought that it was really kind of brilliant, and in a way it seems as if the music tells the story and sound design just as much as the imagery and dancing does.
Well, I'd like to take credit for all your wonderful perceptions. I just wish every audience looked in as deeply as you have.
Oh, well, I mean, I am passionate about the art form, and I'm always looking to like, why does this piece work in particular as opposed to, and there is something to the craft. And obviously you have a lot of experience, so it's a pleasure to speak with you. It's an honor. I'm wondering, well, how long have you how long have you been making dance on camera? At what point in your career did you verge in that direction?
I'm not really good in dates, but it must be about 10 years by now or something like that. The first piece I did was there's a site-specific festival called Trolley Dances in San Diego, where the audience rides the trolley and gets off at multiple stops, and there's a dance in each spot.
Oh, that's a cute idea.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because San Diego, like many cities, is one, spread out, and two, divided by many differences of culture and class and background and so forth. So the trolley is in the city, and it takes us to neighborhoods which some people don't go to, especially dance audiences who are used to going to the theater and paying $50 are coming from the suburbs, right, or more affluent parts, and they're then going. Trolley Dances is taking them and creating a public space, which we don't have much here because everybody's in their car, and bringing people from the local community who are wandering by and see the dance, as well as people who, dance is something that they seek out. So it's a community builder in a bridge, and the trolley is not only a metaphor, but a literal connector between dance and audiences. So really that's how I got my start. And again, I had been making documentaries. I approached Gene Isaacs, who was the creator of this. I don't know what year they're on now. I think they're in their 20th. And said, I make documentaries. I'd love to make a documentary about the process of creating these dances. And she said, sure, go ahead. I've been very fortunate, and I've been able to build a community of interest around each of my films. People who see my curiosity and say, well, that's worth exploring. We'll help you.
What would be your advice to anyone who's interested in exploring the art form of dance on camera?
Big question. I think it depends where they're coming from, what their experience is, and what they're trying to accomplish. All I can say, my experience is that in any of the films I've done, documentary or dance, is that if you have a genuine curiosity, people have, in my experience, responded to it. So it's making these kinds of films is not transactional, because there's, we don't know where they'll be seen. We're grateful when people find them, and there's money for the arts. It's always in short supply, but collaboration, I think, underpins most creative work. And so insofar as you can find appropriate collaborators, then you can make successful work.
Excellent, excellent. So starting from an authentic place and then reaching out and having the spirits of like-minded people carry their vision through. Yeah.
And I'd add one more thing. It's persistence. I tell my students that I'm generally the shy person at the punch bowl in a party, unless I have a project, then I can talk to anybody about anything. And so when you're trying to create something, when you're making something that didn't exist before, something from nothing, you're inventing something, you're going to get lots of no's. There's always going to be obstacles. And if you have the producer hat on, which is a little bit different than the director hat or the editor hat, you just keep going. You turn a no into a yes. You say, I understand that you can't do this, but do you know somebody else who I can talk to? And that one thing leads to another.
I think that's really having the independent mindset, right? Finding a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm working, maybe it's a function of getting older, but my films get shorter and shorter. And people who make more substantial pieces, sometimes they invest 4 or 5 years of their lives to make an hour feature film, So don't embark on such an adventure unless you really have, the commitment to it, because it can take a long time.
Absolutely. And I think that your work really attests to that. You can make something that's a short piece that can be incredibly impactful, right? That can stick with a person and have just as much of an impression, leave just as much of an impression on someone as a full-length work. It's not necessarily the length, it's more about the quality and the craftsmanship of the story that you're telling. So
yeah. I think of them as paintings these days.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of thinking of it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Your beautiful film. Can you tell people where to find your work and keep up with you?
Great. Thanks for that. It's simple. It's my name, Mark Freeman Films, plural, .org works or .com, either one works. And I had the opportunity to film in Europe last fall, and I'm in the process of completing 2 films that I'm pretty excited about. One that I shot in Italy and one in Portugal. And so hopefully.
Are they dance related or?
Oh yeah, 2 short dance films.
Oh, amazing! More.
So next year's festival, I don't know. With fingers crossed, we can submit some more.
Excellent. So looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.